The scrapyard floated in the darkness of space like a graveyard for dead machines. Thousands of broken ships, old engines, and forgotten technology drifted in a slow circle around Nexus Station. This was where things came to die. This was where Taiho spent most of his days. He stood at the back of the auction hall, arms crossed, watching the alien traders bid on pieces of junk. The room was full of different species. Tall insect-like Vel with their shiny shells and cold eyes. Short, round Becky traders who laughed too loud. A few humans scattered here and there, mostly keeping quiet and staying out of the way. That was how things worked in the galaxy now. Humans kept quiet. Humans stayed out of the way. Taiho was 28 years old. He had strong hands from years of working with machines. His face carried a scar across his left cheek, a gift from his time in the military. He had been an engineer once, a good one, serving on a warship called the Brave Wind. Then came the battle at Sector 9. His captain had ordered a retreat, leaving wounded soldiers behind. Taiho had refused. He had stayed, fixed a broken shuttle with nothing but wire and prayer, and saved 11 lives. The military gave him a dishonorable discharge for disobeying orders. Now he fixed broken things in a scrapyard. The universe had a sense of humor. The auctioneer, a fat Becky with golden rings on all 6 fingers, waved his hands at the crowd. Next item, my friends. Something very special. Very rare. Taiho did not pay attention. He was looking for engine parts, nothing more. His own shuttle needed repairs, and he had exactly 12,000 credits to his name. Enough to survive another few months if he was careful. Behold, the auctioneer shouted. A ship from the legendary First Fleet of Humanity. The Hatta! The room went silent for 1 second. Then laughter exploded from every corner. Taiho looked up. On the display screen behind the auctioneer, there was a ship. Or what was left of one. It looked like someone had taken a warship, melted it halfway, and then forgotten about it for 500 years. The hull was black with age. Holes covered the surface like wounds. One of the engine sections was completely missing. First Fleet? A Vel trader said, his voice dripping with amusement. That garbage? I would not use it to store waste. More laughter. The Vel next to him clicked his mandibles together, which was their way of showing extreme pleasure at someone else's misfortune. Even human legends are worthless scrap, he said loudly. No wonder they are a dying species. The words hit Taiho like a punch to the stomach. He knew it was stupid. He knew he should stay quiet, stay out of the way, like a good human. But something inside him, something old and angry, refused to listen. 12,000 credits, Taiho said. The room went silent again. Every eye, every sensor, every antenna turned toward him. The auctioneer blinked his small eyes. I am sorry, did you say? 12,000 credits. For the ship. A Vel trader stepped forward. He was tall, even for his species, with a shell that gleamed like polished metal. Human, he said slowly, you cannot be serious. That wreck is worth nothing. You would waste your money on garbage? Taiho met his eyes. It is my money to waste. The Vel stared at him for a long moment. Then he stepped back, shaking his head. Foolish. Absolutely foolish. But entertaining. He gestured toward the auctioneer. Let the human have his prize. It will make a good story. The auctioneer slammed his gavel down. Sold to the human. 12,000 credits for the legendary Heta. The laughter followed Taiho out of the auction hall. It followed him through the corridors of Nexus Station. It followed him all the way to the docking bay where his new ship waited. His communicator buzzed. He answered it without looking. Taiho. The voice belonged to Jia, his oldest friend. Please tell me the rumors are not true. Which rumors? The one saying you spent your entire life savings on a dead ship from the scrapyard. Taiho looked at the Heta through the docking bay window. Up close, it looked even worse. Like a skeleton of something that had once been great. They are true, he said. Gia was silent for 3 seconds. Then she started yelling. She yelled about his stupidity, his pride, his inability to think before acting. She yelled about how she had warned him 1,000 times about making emotional decisions. She yelled for almost 20 minutes without stopping. Taiho let her finish. Then he said, I am going inside the ship now. Taiho, that thing could fall apart around you. I will call you later, Gia. He ended the call and walked toward the docking tube. The inside of the Heta was dark and cold. Emergency lights flickered weakly along the corridors. Dust covered everything. The air smelled old, like a room that had been sealed for centuries. Taiho walked slowly, his footsteps echoing in the silence. He passed empty crew quarters, a mess hall with tables still bolted to the floor, storage rooms filled with containers he could not open. Everything was dead. Everything was still. He found the bridge at the center of the ship. The captain's chair sat in the middle, facing a wall of dark screens. Consoles lined the walls, covered in dust and silence. Taiho stepped forward and placed his hand on the captain's console. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the ship woke up. Light exploded through the bridge. Screens flickered to life. The floor hummed with sudden power. A sound filled the air, deep and strong, like a giant taking its first breath after a long sleep. And in front of Taiho, a hologram appeared. It was a woman. She wore an old military uniform, the kind Taiho had only seen in history books. Her hair was pulled back tight. Her face was stern, serious, and her eyes looked at him like she was measuring his worth. Authorization recognized, she said. Her voice was cold and clear. Human DNA confirmed. Neural patterns acceptable. Welcome aboard, Captain. Taiho stared at her. Who? What are you? I am Yuna, the hologram said. Artificial intelligence of the battleship Heta, First Fleet of the Human Expansion Force. I have been waiting in darkness for 487 years. Her eyes narrowed slightly. I was expecting someone more impressive. Taiho felt his heart beating fast. This ship. It actually works? Define works. Yuna's voice carried a hint of dry humor. My hull is damaged. My weapons are offline. My engines require extensive repairs. But my core systems are intact. My memory is complete. And now I have a captain. She paused. Even if he appears to be a scrapyard worker with poor financial judgment. Taiho almost laughed. I am not a captain. I am nobody. Yuna tilted her head slightly. The Heta does not accept nobody. The authorization protocols are very specific. You carry the genetic markers of a command-level officer. Your psychological profile shows unusual resistance to pressure and strong protective instincts. She paused again. You are also the first human to touch this console in nearly 5 centuries. The Heta has been waiting for someone worthy. Worthy of what? Yuna's expression did not change, but something in her eyes seemed to shift. The galaxy has forgotten what humanity used to be, Captain. They see you as weak, as a dying species, as scrap. The lights on the bridge pulsed slowly, like a heartbeat. They are wrong. And with your help, I intend to remind them. Taiho stood in the center of the awakening ship. Surrounded by technology he did not understand, facing an AI that had slept for centuries. He thought about the Veltrader's words. Even human legends are worthless scrap. He thought about the laughter that had followed him out of the auction hall. He thought about 11 wounded soldiers on a battlefield, waiting for someone to save them. Okay, Taiho said quietly. Show me what you can do. Yuna almost smiled. Almost. With pleasure, Captain. Let us begin. The Hedda was alive, but barely. Taiho spent the first 3 days learning the ship systems with Yuna as his guide. The AI was patient, but her patience had sharp edges. She explained things once, expected him to remember, and showed clear disappointment when he made mistakes. The primary power coupling connects to the secondary distribution node, she said, her holographic form flickering beside him as he crawled through a maintenance tunnel. Not the tertiary backup. You are about to electrocute yourself. Taiho pulled his hand back quickly. Maybe you could warn me before I touch things. I just did. Yuna's voice carried no sympathy. Perhaps you should listen faster. Despite her coldness, Taiho was beginning to understand the ship. The Hedda had been built during humanity's golden age, 500 years ago, when humans had stood as equals among the great powers of the galaxy. The first fleet had been the pride of the species. 50 warships, each one a masterpiece of engineering and courage. Then came the Dominion, Swarm, a species of mindless hunters that consumed everything in their path. They had swept through the galaxy like a plague, destroying worlds and ending civilizations. The great alien empires had fallen back, unable to stop them, but humanity had stood. The first fleet had met the Swarm in a battle that lasted 7 days and 7 nights. When it was over, the Swarm was broken and humanity was exhausted. The cost had been terrible. Most of the fleet was destroyed. The survivors were scattered, and slowly, over centuries, humanity forgot how to build such wonders. They became a minor species, living in the shadow of others, while their legends gathered dust. Yuna told Taiho these stories as they worked. Her voice carried old pride and old pain. We did not hide because we were afraid, she said. We hid because we knew the galaxy would try to take our technology. The Vel, the Becky, the others, they feared what we could build. So the surviving ships scattered and slept, waiting for a time when humanity would need us again. And that time is now? Taiho asked. Yuna was silent for a moment. Perhaps. You are here. That is a beginning. On the 4th day, Taiho called Jia. She arrived at the docking bay with her younger brother Do-hyun, both of them looking at the Hedda with very different expressions. Jia looked worried. Do-hyun looked like a child seeing a miracle. This is impossible, Do-hyun whispered. He was 23, thin and pale from spending too much time in engine rooms instead of sunlight. His eyes were wide behind his glasses. This is First Fleet architecture. Look at the hull composition. Look at the energy signatures. We do not build like this anymore. We cannot build like this anymore. Jia crossed her arms. She was 2 years older than Taiho, with sharp eyes and a sharper tongue. She had been a cargo pilot for 15 years, surviving in a galaxy that did not respect humans by being smarter and faster than everyone else. So you bought a museum piece, she said. Congratulations. Can it actually fly? Yuna appeared beside them, making both siblings jump back in surprise. I can do more than fly, the AI said coolly. I am a warship of the First Fleet. I have weapons that modern engineers cannot understand and engines that can outrun anything in this sector. Jia stared at the hologram. And you are, Yuna, the ship's artificial intelligence. And you must be the friend who yelled at my captain for 20 minutes. Her lips curved slightly. I reviewed the communication logs. Your vocabulary is impressive. Do-hyun was not listening. He had already moved past them, running his hands along the corridor walls, muttering to himself about power conduits and shield generators. This is beautiful. This is perfect. The engineering principles here. We lost all of this. How did we lose all of this? Gia grabbed Taiho's arm and pulled him aside. "This is serious," she said quietly. "If this ship is real, if it actually works, you are in danger. The Vel Consortium will not let a human own something like this. They will come for you." "Let them come," Taiho said. Gia's eyes widened. "Listen to me. I know you have this stupid heroic streak. I know you like to protect people and stand up for things. But this is different. This is politics on a galactic scale. You cannot fight the Vel Consortium with one broken warship and a lot of pride." "She is correct," Yuna said, appearing beside them again. "The Vel have been monitoring our power signatures since I awakened. They have already dispatched a recovery team." Taiho felt his blood go cold. "What?" 3 scout ships. "They will arrive in approximately 2 hours." Yuna's expression did not change. "They believe I am still a derelict. They plan to board, study my systems, and claim everything for themselves. Can we run?" Gia asked. "No. My engines require extensive repairs before I can achieve faster-than-light travel. Can we fight?" Yuna was silent for a moment. Then she smiled, and it was not a warm smile. "Yes, we can fight." The next 2 hours were chaos. Do-Hyun worked on the power systems, while Taiho helped Yuna bring the defensive protocols online. Gia wanted to leave, to take her own ship and escape before the Vel arrived, but she did not go. She stayed, complaining the entire time about stupid decisions and suicidal friends. When the Vel scouts arrived, the Hatton was still mostly dark. The hull looked dead. The external sensors showed no power readings. From the outside, it was exactly what the Vel expected, a worthless piece of human garbage. They docked without asking permission. 3 scouts, each one carrying weapons and scanning equipment. They walked through the dark corridors, confident and careless. "Spread out," the lead scout ordered. "Find the engine room. Find the bridge. Take everything useful." They never reached the bridge. The lights came on suddenly, blazing white. Every door in the ship slammed shut at once. The scouts raised their weapons, looking around in confusion. Yuna's voice echoed through the corridors. "You are not welcome aboard a vessel of the First Fleet." The lead scout laughed nervously. "An automated defense system? Impressive, but outdated. We will simply override." The floor beneath him opened, and he fell through. He landed hard in a cargo bay, surrounded by darkness. Before he could stand, restraining fields locked him in place. The other 2 scouts tried to run. The ship would not let them. Corridors shifted. Doors sealed. Air pressure changed, making their heads spin. Within minutes, all 3 were captured, held in separate rooms, completely helpless. Taiho stood on the bridge, watching through the internal cameras. "You could have killed them." "Yes," Yuna agreed. "But dead scouts create martyrs. Living scouts create fear." She looked at him with something like respect. "I will release them back to their ships with a message for the consortium. The Hedda is not for sale, and it is not undefended." The scouts were ejected from the ship 10 minutes later. They flew back to consortium space as fast as their engines could carry them, but the damage was done. Within hours, a formal demand arrived at Nexus Station. The Vel Consortium, speaking with the authority of one of the galaxy's great powers, commanded the station to surrender the human named Taiho and his stolen vessel stolen, as if he had not paid for the ship with his own money, as if humans were not allowed to own their own history. Gia read the message and went pale. "They are serious. If Nexus Station does not hand you over, they will face economic sanctions, possibly military action." Do-Hyun looked up from his work on the engine console. "What do we do?" Taiho stood in the center of the bridge, looking at the message on the screen. He thought about running. He thought about hiding. He thought about all the sensible, safe choices that would keep him alive. Then he thought about the Veltrader's words. Even human legends are worthless scrap. We leave, he said. Tonight. Before Nexus Station can decide what to do with us. Leave and go where? Gia demanded. Una stepped forward. The outer systems. The lawless territories. Places where the consortium's authority is weak. Her eyes gleamed. We need time to repair, to gather resources, to grow strong. And then what? Una looked at Taiho, and for the first time, he saw something like approval in her ancient eyes. It has been too long since someone reminded the galaxy why humans were feared. Perhaps it is time to refresh their memory. Taiho nodded slowly. He did not feel like a hero. He did not feel brave or strong or worthy. But he felt something else, something he had not felt since they took his uniform away. Purpose. Get the engines ready, he said. We leave in 1 hour. The Hetton hummed with power, and somewhere in its ancient circuits, something that might have been hope began to glow. The Drift, as the outer systems were called, was a place without rules. Pirates, smugglers, refugees, and outcasts made their homes in stations built from salvage and hope. Here, the Vel Consortium's authority meant nothing. Here, survival was the only law. The Het moved through this dangerous space like a ghost. Each day, Daohin worked on repairs, slowly bringing systems back online. Each night, Taiho trained with Una, learning the ship's combat protocols, understanding how to fight as one with the ancient vessel. And each week, they took jobs. Escort missions for merchant ships too poor to afford real protection. Salvage runs into dangerous zones where other crews refused to go. Once, they negotiated with a pirate fleet that had captured a civilian transport. The pirates had laughed at first, seeing only one old ship facing their dozen vessels. They stopped laughing when the Hita's forward cannons powered up, glowing with energy that modern weapons could not match. The pirates released their captives and fled. Word began to spread through the Drift. A human ship, ancient but powerful, defending the weak and challenging the strong. Some called Taiho a fool. Others called him a hero. He was not sure which was correct. Gia had stopped complaining about the situation, though she had not stopped worrying. She had taken command of daily operations, managing supplies, plotting courses, keeping the crew alive. She was good at it, better than she wanted to admit. Daohin rarely left the engine room. He had found purpose in the ancient technology, spending every waking hour learning its secrets. He had lost weight and gained dark circles under his eyes, but his smile came more easily now. For the first time in his life, he was doing work that mattered. Then they found Myra. It happened during what should have been a simple salvage run. A consortium transport had crashed in an asteroid field, officially declared lost with no survivors. Taiho had brought the Heta close, hoping to find useful materials. Instead, he found a prison. The transport had been carrying human slaves. Men, women, children, all bound for consortium worlds where they would serve alien masters until they died. Most of the prisoners had not survived the crash. But in one sealed compartment, Taiho found a young woman, barely conscious, clinging to life. Her name was Mira. She was 25, thin and scarred, with eyes that had seen too much pain. She did not speak for the first week after they rescued her. She sat in a corner of the medical bay, watching everything, trusting nothing. Gia brought her food and water without asking questions. Daohin showed her how to help with small repairs, giving her hands something to do. Una observed silently, processing data, making assessments. Taiho gave her space. He understood trauma. He knew that some wounds needed time. On the 8th day, Myra spoke. The consortium, she said, her voice rough from disuse. They have been doing this for centuries, keeping humans weak. controlling our access to technology, to resources, to knowledge. They are afraid of what we might become if we were allowed to grow. Tai-Ho sat across from her in the mess hall. How do you know this? I worked in their records department. Before I tried to escape. Before they caught me. Her hands trembled slightly. They have files on humanity going back 500 years. After the Swarm War, when the first fleet was destroyed, the consortium led the effort to prevent humanity from rebuilding. They convinced the Galactic Council that humans were too dangerous, too aggressive, too unpredictable. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. They called it protection, for the good of the galaxy. But it was fear. They saw what we could do. They never wanted to see it again. Yuna appeared beside them. Our information matches my historical records. After the Swarm War, I observed increasing restrictions on human colonies. I assumed it was temporary. I was wrong. Myra looked at the hologram with surprise. You are a First Fleet AI. I am. Then you know. You know what humanity used to be. I remember. Yuna's voice softened slightly. I remember Admiral Su-Jin, who commanded this ship until her death. I remember the Battle of Broken Stars, where 3 human vessels held the line against 1,000 swarm creatures. I remember when the galaxy looked at humanity with respect, not pity. Myra stood up slowly. She was still weak, still damaged, but something new burned in her eyes. I want to help. I have information about consortium operations. Trade routes, communication codes, fleet positions. I can make myself useful. Tai-Ho nodded. Welcome to the crew. Over the following weeks, Myra proved her value. Her intelligence about the consortium helped them avoid patrols and find weaknesses. Her tactical mind impressed even Yuna, who began consulting her during mission planning. But the consortium was not standing still. Tai-Ho had embarrassed them. A single human, in a junk ship from a scrapyard, had defied one of the great powers of the galaxy. They could not allow this insult to stand. The pursuit fleet found them near the dead system of Terminus 7, a burned-out star surrounded by empty planets. 8 consortium warships, modern and deadly, against 1 ancient vessel still running at partial capacity. We should run, Gia said, studying the sensor readings on the bridge. We can reach the nebula before they catch us. Lose them in the interference. We would not make it, Doyen said quietly. He was studying the engine readings. The fast of the light drive is still unstable. 1 jump, maybe 2, before it fails completely. If we run now and the drive breaks, we are finished. Tai-Ho looked at Yuna. Options? The IIS expression was calm, almost peaceful. We fight. Against 8 ships? We are at 60% combat capacity. We have 1 working cannon array and limited shield strength. Correct. Yuna smiled thinly. But we have something they do not. What? 500 years of combat experience. And a captain who does not know how to surrender. Tai-Ho felt his heart racing. 8 against 1. Impossible odds. Certain death. And yet, show me the battle protocols, he said. All of them. What followed was the longest 4 hours of Tai-Ho's life. Yuna had not been lying about her experience. The Hita's battle systems were designed for a single purpose, to turn 1 ship into an army. The neural link between captain and AI allowed them to move as 1 mind, predicting enemy movements, exploiting weaknesses, striking where it hurt most. The consortium fleet was confident. They approached in standard formation, weapons charged, expecting an easy victory. They were wrong. The Hatton did not fight like a modern ship. It fought like a living creature, twisting and diving through space in patterns that seemed impossible. Tai-Ho felt the ship around him, felt its hunger and its fury, felt 5 centuries of sleeping anger finally finding release. The first consortium ship died surprised, its shields penetrated by weapons it did not know existed. The second died confused, caught in a crossfire that came from angles that should not have been possible. The third died afraid, trying to flee as the ancient warship cut through its engines like paper. By the time the battle ended, 3 consortium ships were destroyed and 2 more were crippled, drifting helplessly. The remaining 3 fled, their faster-than-light drives screaming as they escaped. On the bridge of the Hedda, Taiho stood surrounded by screens showing victory. He was exhausted. His head hurt from the neural link. His hands were shaking. But he was alive. They were all alive. That was incredible, Dohyun whispered. We actually won. Jia was staring at Taiho like she had never seen him before. You just destroyed 3 consortium warships. Do you understand what this means? The entire galaxy is going to know about this. Myra stepped forward. Good. Let them know. Let them remember what humans can do. Yuna appeared beside Taiho, and for the first time, her expression held something like warmth. Well done, Captain. That was not terrible. Taiho almost laughed. High praise. Do not let it go to your head. But she was almost smiling. Then a new signal appeared on the communication screen. An ancient frequency, unused for centuries. A voice crackled through the static human but different, speaking words that made everyone freeze. This is Captain Wook of the battleship Bulgy, First Fleet of the Human Expansion Force. We detected your combat signature and your energy patterns. We have been sleeping in the dark for 500 years. The voice paused, heavy with emotion. We are not alone anymore. Please respond. Taiho stared at the screen. Another ship. Another survivor from the Golden Age. The Bulgy, Yuna said softly. I thought she was destroyed at the Battle of Crimson Dawn. I thought I was the last one. Taiho reached for the communications panel. His hands were steady now. This is Captain Taiho of the Heta. We hear you. We are here. He took a breath. It is time to wake the others. Through the speakers, Captain Wook's voice carried the weight of centuries. Agreed. The galaxy has forgotten us. Perhaps it is time to remind them. The Heta turned toward the signal, engines humming with new purpose. Behind them, the wreckage of their enemies drifted silently in the void. The First Fleet was rising again. He stood in the cargo bay of the Bulgy as the Heta docked alongside his vessel, waiting with the patience of someone who had waited centuries for this moment. His uniform was ancient, the same style Yuna wore in her holographic form. His hair was white, his face lined with age, but his eyes were sharp and clear. When Taiho stepped aboard, Wook studied him for a long moment. Then he bowed, a formal gesture from a forgotten age. The commander who awakened the Heta, Wook said. I have watched your battles from the shadows. You fight well for someone who was not trained by the fleet. Taiho returned the bow, feeling awkward and unworthy. I had good teachers. The ship, Yuna lives? For the first time, emotion crossed Wook's weathered face. I thought. When the Heta went dark, I assumed the worst. Yuna appeared beside Taiho, her holographic form solidifying in the Bulgy's projection field. She looked at Wook, and something passed between them that Taiho could not read. Old memories. Old grief. Old hope. Hello, Captain, she said softly. It has been a long time. Wook reached out, his hand passing through her holographic form. Too long. Far too long. He cleared his throat, composing himself. But we have work to do. Sentiment can wait. The Bulgy was larger than the Heta, a heavy cruiser designed for extended operations in hostile space. Its AI, named Yunji, was warmer than Yuna, greeting the newcomers with genuine pleasure. New friends, Yunji said cheerfully. We have not had visitors in. Actually, I do not remember the last time. How wonderful. Wook led them to the bridge, where ancient screens showed star maps covered in markers. 12 ships, he explained. 12 vessels from the First Fleet, hidden across the galaxy before the Golden Age ended. We scattered, found hiding places, and slept. The plan was simple. Wait for humanity to need us again. Why now? Jia asked. She had come aboard with Doyen and Myra, unwilling to let Taiho face this alone. Because someone finally came looking, Wook said. Because the Hedda woke up and started fighting. We felt her signature across the void. He looked at Taiho with something like respect. It reminded us that there was still something worth fighting for. Over the following weeks, they searched for the other ships, thought not all could be saved. 2 had been destroyed centuries ago, found and stripped by consortium salvage teams. 1 had drifted into a sun. Another had gone so deep into hiding that even its fellow vessels could not find it. But 5 more ships answered the call. The Yumyo, a fast attack vessel. The Samjoko, a destroyer with weapons that made modern arsenals look like toys. The Kealama, a carrier capable of holding hundreds of fighters. And 2 others, damaged but functional, joining the growing fleet. 7 ships in total. It was not the 50 that had once protected humanity, but it was enough. The galaxy began to notice. Word spread through the outer territories, then to the core worlds, then to every corner of civilization. The First Fleet was returning. Ancient human warships, technology that modern science could not explain, were gathering in the darkness between stars. Human colonies, long silent and obedient, began to stir. Young people spoke of legends their grandparents had told them. Workers whispered about the ships in their factories and farms. For the first time in centuries, humans looked up at the stars with something other than resignation. The consortium was not pleased that they demanded an emergency session of the Galactic Council, calling for sanctions against humanity for the immediate destruction of the rogue warships, for punishments that would ensure humans never rose again. These vessels are a threat to galactic peace, the consortium ambassador declared. Humanity has proven itself unstable, aggressive, and dangerous. If we allow them to rebuild their military capability, the consequences could be devastating. Other species were divided. The Becky, always practical, argued for negotiation. The pale, ghostly beings called the Whisper Collective remained silent, watching with their unknowable eyes. Some remembered the Swarm War, when humanity had stood while others fell. They owed their existence to human sacrifice. But fear is a powerful force, and the consortium used it well. On the awakening fleet, debates raged. We should strike first, suggested Captain Hana of the Samjoko, a fierce woman who had been asleep even longer than Wook. The consortium will never accept our existence. Better to destroy them before they destroy us. And prove everything they say about humanity? Though Hyun countered. He had grown more confident over the months, finding his voice among legends. We attack first, and we become the monsters they claim we are. Taiho listened to the arguments, feeling the weight of decisions that would affect billions of lives. He was not ready for this. He was a salvage worker, a disgraced soldier, a man who had bought a ship because his pride was hurt. How had he ended up here? Yuna appeared beside him as he stood alone on the Hita's observation deck, looking out at the gathered fleet. You are troubled, she said. I am not a leader. These captains, they have centuries of experience. They know things I cannot even imagine. Why do they keep looking at me? Because you woke us up. Yuna's voice was gentle, more gentle than he had ever heard it. When you bought the Hedda, you had nothing. No power, no support, no hope. But you chose to stand anyway. That is what leadership means. Not having all the answers. Just being willing to face the questions. Taiho shook his head. You give me too much credit. Perhaps, but I have watched you for months now. I have seen you fight when running was easier. I have seen you protect strangers who had no claim on your help. I have seen you treat my crew with respect, even when they did not deserve it. She paused. You are not perfect, Captain, but you are worthy. Before Taiho could respond, alarms began to sound across the fleet. The news came from a dozen sources at once, transmitted on every frequency. Impossible to ignore. The consortium had done the unthinkable, desperate to destroy the awakening fleet. Before it could grow stronger, they had made a deal with the devil. Deep in the outer darkness, where even pirates feared to travel, the remnants of the Dominion swarm still existed. Fragments of the horror that humanity had defeated 5 centuries ago, surviving in the void, waiting for their chance to feed again. The consortium had awakened them, armed them, pointed them at humanity's doorstep. If humans want to relive their legends, the consortium ambassador had announced, let them face their old nightmares. On the Heatas bridge, Mira was the first to speak. They are insane. The swarm cannot be controlled. Once awakened, they will consume everything in their path. The consortium believes they can direct the initial attack, Una said grimly. After humanity is destroyed, they plan to withdraw and let the swarm burn itself out. They are wrong, Captain Wook said through the communication link. The swarm does not burn out. It only grows. Taiho looked at the tactical display. The swarm fleet was already moving, combined with consortium warships, heading toward human core worlds. 200 vessels. Against them, 7 awakening ships. We cannot win this, Jia said quietly. Not with what we have. Taiho was silent for a long moment. Then he looked at Doyen. You said you found something in the old records. Something called the Roar. What is it? Doyen's eyes widened. I finished analyzing it last week. It is not a weapon, not exactly. It is a connection system. When activated, every ship in the First Fleet can link their AIs together. They become one mind, one will. That is how we defeated the swarm the first time, Una said slowly. I remember now. Admiral Sujin activated the Roar at the Battle of Broken Stars. For 7 days, 50 ships fought as one being. We knew what the swarm would do before they did it. We were unstoppable. Can we do it again? Taiho asked. With only 7 ships? Una and Yunji exchanged glances across the communication link. The other is joined them. Ancient minds considering possibilities that modern science could not comprehend. It is possible, Una finally said. But there is a risk. The neural load is enormous. The captains who link with us will feel everything their ships feel. Every impact. Every wound. If a ship is destroyed, the link captain may not survive. Taiho looked around the bridge at his crew. Jia, who had followed him into madness because friendship meant more than safety. Dohyun, who had found purpose in ancient technology. Mira, who had escaped one nightmare only to face another. Contact the fleet, he said. Tell them to prepare the Roar. And what will you tell them when they ask if we can win? Una asked. Taiho thought about the scrapyard where he had found her. About the laughter of aliens who called humanity worthless. About 11 wounded soldiers on a battlefield, waiting for someone to save them. I will tell them what Admiral Sujin told her fleet 500 years ago. He straightened his shoulders. Today we remind the galaxy why they should never have counted us out. Today the First Fleet flies again. Across 7 ships, ancient systems began to hum with power. The Roar was waking up, and with it, the hope of a species that had been told its best days were behind it. They were wrong. Humanity was just getting started. The Nexus Gate was humanity's doorway. Every major trade route to human core worlds passed through this single point in space, a massive structure built during the Golden Age and maintained by alien hands ever since. 3 colony worlds sat behind it, containing 80 million human lives. The swarm fleet approached like a storm of death. 200 vessels, most of them consortium warships, but mixed among them were the nightmare shapes of the Dominion swarm, creatures that should have died 5 centuries ago, awakened from their dark sleep, hungry for the flesh of the species that had defeated them. Against them stood 7 ships. Taiho watched the enemy approach through the heated sensors. The odds were impossible. 28 to 1. Modern military doctrine said anything beyond 5 to 1 was suicide. This was beyond suicide. This was madness. But humanity had always been a little mad. "The roar is ready," Yuna said. Her voice carried through every ship in the fleet, connecting them all. "All captains, prepare for neural link. This will be intense." Taiho took a deep breath. Around him, his crew waited. Jia at the helm, her hands steady despite the fear in her eyes. Dohyun at the engineering station, monitoring systems he had repaired with his own hands. Myra at tactical, ready to use her knowledge of the enemy against them. "Activate the roar," Taiho said. The world changed. Suddenly, Taiho was not one man on one ship. He was 7 captains, 7A is 7 ancient vessels moving as one. He felt the Bulgi's steady power, the Samjoko's eager aggression, the Kealma's protective embrace of its fire squadrons. He felt Yuna and Yunji and the others, their centuries of experience flowing through him like water. He was the fleet. The fleet was him. "All ships," he said, and his voice echoed through 7 bridges simultaneously. "Begin attack run." The first fleet moved. From the outside, it looked impossible. 7 ships, badly outnumbered, charging directly at 200 enemies. The consortium commanders laughed. The swarm creatures shrieked with anticipation. Then the first fleet began to dance. Ships that should have crashed into each other passed within meters, their movements perfectly synchronized. Weapons fired in patterns that covered every angle, creating walls of destruction that enemy vessels flew into at full speed. Fighters launched from the Kealma in waves, coordinated so precisely that they seemed like a single organism. The swarm creatures were fast and savage, but they were predictable. Yuna and the other A's had fought them before, centuries ago. They remembered every pattern, every tactic, every weakness. The linked fleet anticipated swarm attacks before they happened, turning ambushes into traps. The consortium ships were modern and powerful, but their commanders had never faced anything like this. They gave orders that their ships tried to follow, but the first fleet was already gone, already somewhere else, already tearing through their formation from a new angle. The first hour saw 12 enemy ships destroyed. The second hour saw 20 more. The first fleet took damage, shields flickering, hulls cracking, but they kept fighting, the roar holding them together. Captain Wook took the Bulgi into the heart of the swarm formation, drawing their attention, becoming a target that every creature wanted to destroy. His ship burned under the assault, systems failing one after another. "Captain," Inji said, her voice strained, "we cannot survive much longer." "We do not need to survive," Wook replied calmly. "We need to give them time." Through the roar, Taiho felt Wook's pain, felt the Bulgi dying around him. He tried to send help, but the old captain refused. "Finish this, young one. Finish what we started. Let the old ships rest." Dahyun, linked to every system in the fleet, did something extraordinary. He broadcast a signal on swarm frequencies, a pattern he had decoded from the ancient records. For 30 precious seconds, the swarm creatures hesitated, confused, their coordination shattered. In those 30 seconds, the first fleet struck. Jia led the civilian ships in a flanking maneuver. No one had expected them. Cargo haulers and mining vessels and passenger ships, hundreds of them, armed with whatever weapons they could find. They had refused to abandon their fleet. They had come to fight alongside their legends. "You idiots," Gia said, tears running down her face as she watched them arrive. "You beautiful, stupid idiots." Myra used her knowledge of consortium tactics to predict their movements, calling out positions before enemy ships could reach them. Her voice was steady, her mind sharp, every piece of intelligence she had suffered to gather now saving lives. And Taiho, at the center of it all, held the roar together. It was like holding fire in his hands. The neural load was enormous, threatening to tear his mind apart. He felt every ship, every wound, every death. When a civilian vessel exploded, he felt the lives ending. When a First Fleet ship took damage, he felt the pain in his own body. But he did not let go. "Forward," he commanded, and the fleet obeyed. "All ships, target the consortium flagship." The consortium flagship was a massive vessel, the pride of their fleet, commanded by the same admiral who had ordered humanity destroyed. It sat at the center of the enemy formation, protected by a wall of warships. The wall did not matter. The Hetton led the charge, diving through fire and death, the ancient warships screaming with power that modern engineers could not understand. Beside it flew the Samjoko and the Gumo, their weapons blazing. Above them, fighters from the Kealama swept aside the defenders. The flagship tried to run. It was too slow. Taiho felt the Hita's weapons lock onto the massive vessel. He felt Yuna's cold satisfaction, her centuries of waiting finally reaching their end. "Yuna," he said. "Together, together, Captain." The Heta did not fire. It rammed. The ancient warship slammed into the consortium flagship at full speed, its reinforced hull tearing through enemy armor like paper. For one terrible moment, Taiho felt the impact in his bones, felt the Heta crying out in pain and triumph. Then the flagship's core exploded. The blast shattered the center of the enemy formation. The consortium command structure collapsed. Ships that had been following orders suddenly found themselves alone, leaderless, surrounded by opponents they could not defeat. They surrendered. First 1, then 10, then 50. The swarm creatures, without consortium support, fell back into chaos. Human forces hunted them down, one by one, finishing what their ancestors had started 5 centuries ago. When the battle ended, 47 enemy ships had been destroyed. 70 more had surrendered. The swarm remnants had been eliminated entirely. The First Fleet had lost 2 ships. The Bulgi was a burning wreck, its systems dead. The Gumaho had been torn apart, protecting a civilian transport. Captain Wook was found in the ruins of his bridge, barely alive, pulled from the flames by rescue crews who wept as they carried him. The Hetton survived, but barely. Half its hull was gone. Systems that had worked for 5 centuries were dark forever. But the crew was alive. Jia, Doyun, Mira, all of them battered and burned but breathing. And Yuna was still there, her holographic form flickering weakly in the damaged projection systems. "We did it," she said, her voice filled with wonder. "We actually did it." The galactic community watched in stunned silence. The consortium's leadership, those who had survived, were arrested by their own people. The Galactic Council moved quickly to recognize humanity's right to self-defense and quietly removed all talk of sanctions. Other species began to remember the old stories. The humans who had stood against the swarm, the First Fleet that had saved civilization. They had called humanity weak for so long that they had forgotten the truth. Humanity was never weak. Humanity was just sleeping. Taiho refused command of the restored fleet. He had never wanted to be a legend. He was still just a salvage worker with a ship he had bought from a scrapyard. But he recommended Jia for the position of fleet admiral. She tried to refuse. He reminded her of all the times she had yelled at him for making bad decisions. "Someone needs to make good decisions for a change," he said. "That was always you." Captain Wook survived, though he would never command a ship again. He became an advisor, teaching a new generation of human officers the lessons of the Golden Age. Dong-Hyun was given his own engineering division, tasked with understanding First Fleet technology and finding ways to rebuild what had been lost. Myra became head of intelligence, using her knowledge of enemy operations to ensure that humans would never be caught off guard again. The Hetton was rebuilt, better than before. Yuna welcomed Taiho back to the captain's chair with something that looked very much like affection. "Ready for your next terrible decision, Captain?" she asked. Taiho smiled. "Always." Behind them, in scrapyards and hidden places across the galaxy, other ancient ships began to stir. The First Fleet had numbered not 12, but 50. Others had been too well hidden to find during the crisis. But now, with humanity rising again, they sensed that it was safe to wake up. In a junkyard on a forgotten moon, a dusty hull began to glow. In an asteroid field that no one had visited for centuries, an engine hummed to life. In the darkness between stars, where lost things waited to be found, the rest of the First Fleet opened their eyes. Humanity's golden age had ended 500 years ago. Its second golden age was just beginning on the bridge of the Hedda. Taiho stood surrounded by his crew, his friends, his family. He thought about the Vel trader who had laughed at him